Hello everyone and welcome to episode 53 of Generation GC, March On from Good Morning Revival, Good Charlotte's fourth album released in 2007 with Jenn Evans of Let's Talk Records. Let's Talk Records is hosted by Emily McLeod and Jenn Evans, best friends of 21 years who share a passion for the way music can unlock our emotions and speak to both memories and current situations alike. They have spent much of their friendship sharing pieces of music with each other, so translating that into a podcast platform was a natural passion project. Emily works in the tech industry and volunteers much of her time towards New Hampshire wildlife rehabilitation, and Jenn is a freelance illustrator and architecture administrator based in Boston. When they're not at work, they're most definitely planning for their next concert or dissecting and analyzing their favorite records. Before we get into this episode, I wanted to give everyone a heads up and content warning regarding mental illness and depression, as well as self-harm. There are no graphic incidents of any kind of harm mentioned in this episode, but I wanted to give a heads up in case, you're not feeling like that's something you can handle listening to right now. I hope you can find some comfort in this episode. I know that talking about depression, talking about mental illness, talking about any kind of trauma or vulnerability that we've been through can be really hard, but I think there's, at least personally, I find a lot of comfort in connecting with others and in hearing that other people have been able to make it through anything they've been through, and that's what I think is so special about this song. I'm going to give you some resources, and I will also put these in the show notes. If you are in crisis in the US, you can call 1-800-273-TALK or text HOME to 741-741 for the crisis text line. And in Canada, you can call the Crisis Assistance Hotline at 833-456-4566. You can also visit To Right Love and Harm's website, twloha.com, and click their Find Help button, and they'll help you find resources in your area. I also wanted to say going forward that I love having guests from all around the world and from all different backgrounds on Generation GC. I am really hoping to just diversify who I have on the show in 2021 because I know that the GC fam truly is worldwide. So I want to show that in who I have on the show. And hey, if English is not your first language, that's totally okay. As long as you're comfortable holding a conversation in English, then you're good to go. I want to remind everyone to please visit blacklivesmatters.card.co and antisemitism.card.co to continue educating yourself on Black Lives Matter and anti-Semitism, two things that are still very prevalent in our society in 2021. Finally, Generation GC stickers are here. If you do want stickers, there's two things you can do. Number one, you can support the show on Anchor. Go to anchor.fm/generationgcpod and click support. Everything that comes into that goes right back in to making the show as best as it can be. It helps me buy equipment such as headphones and laptop risers. It helps me print and ship stickers. Helps me with any kind of resources if there's any, information that's beyond a paywall. It helps all of that. Everything goes right back into making the show the best it can be. Or you can make a charitable donation. And this week, I want to encourage everyone to help the folks in Texas right now. In case you're not aware, an unprecedented winter storm has hit the state and has left a lot of people across the state without power, without running water, without heat. And that's a pretty scary situation. It's a terrifying thing to happen anywhere in the country, but the state of Texas just doesn't have the infrastructure to support winter storms the way that northern states would have built in. So it's very difficult. It's a very scary time, and there are a lot of organizations that can use our help, but one that I want to shout out to is Camp Rhonda, which is an autonomous encampment organized by the Dallas Houseless Committee. So it's a collective of unhoused neighbors, mutual aid orgs, and DSE members. And I'm going to link their Amazon wish list in the show notes. Anything that you purchase from there goes directly to unhoused folks, and there's plenty of items at several different price levels. Anything that you can support them would be amazing, and it would go directly to helping someone that would really need it. You can visit at Camp Rhonda, CAMPRHONDA 2620 on Instagram if you want to see what is going on. Finally, also, please keep up with Generation GC on socials. We are at Generation GC Pod, BOD, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And I'll post, here and there throughout the week, I will sometimes post other things you can do to get some stickers. So different ways to help promote the show and spread the word, different ways that you can make a difference in the world, because I think that's really important. Well, thank you for tuning in. Now on to episode 53 of Generation GC, March On.
Okay, so, oh my gosh, the emotions I have about this song. I have so much to say about this song. But first, we'll start with the basics. March On is track 13, the final track on Good Morning Revival, not counting, various bonus tracks and B-sides. Track 12 was Broken Hearts Parade, which, just talk about, a roller coaster of emotions from one to the next. It was not a single. There's no music video. Setlist.fm has it ranked number 51 on their list of most played songs with 10 times of it being played, although, we obviously know that's not always totally accurate. Basically, it was played a handful of times in 2007, 2008. I am literally so mad I did not get to see it live any of those times. And just relevant story, per a blog post review on mysanantonio.com, Benji apparently introduced this as his favorite song on Good Morning Revival. There was also an acoustic version available on the band's website. I don't want to say too much yet, but yeah, I love the acoustic. We got a lot to talk about, but first, Jen, I want to help our listeners get to know you.
Sure.
So the first question I like to ask is, when did you first hear Good Charlotte, and what were your first thoughts on them?
Yeah, so I heard Good Charlotte when I was probably about 10 years old. Mm-hmm. I feel like as a lot of music comes to you, it came from an older cousin who was about a year older than I was. And I remember her putting Good Charlotte in front of me. And even though I thought she was the coolest person and was definitely into everything she was into, I remember genuinely loving Good Charlotte, and just something clicked in my brain. So it was this pretty cool thing that we got to share the passion over. And, it kind of was like a wildfire. My mom is very into the music that I'm into, which is pretty cool, but That's was
very cool.
It's very helpful, and was as a young kid. So of course she fell in love with Good Charlotte, and, many of my friends were into it as well, but that might have been the first big switch in my head that I was just someone who was very inclined to loving alternative music.
Yeah. So they were that introduction for you to the whole kind of scene.
Oh, definitely. 10-year-old me was wow, I'm suddenly an angsty teenager and I love it.
Right. Oh, people look like this. People dress like this.
I was I want to look like that and dress like that.
Right. I feel I think I'm a little older than you based on what I remember you saying in your podcast, but back then when you were 10 years old, you didn't have the same access to social media that you did. So it was I feel kids that age nowadays, they're on TikTok and they see what scene kids, or whatever the today equivalent is, what they see what they look like. But to me, it was I get exposed to that and it's whoa, discovering this whole new world.
I think MySpace was just starting.
Yeah.
Maybe even when I, was 10, 11, I don't even know if MySpace was a thing yet. So you'd have these internet forums where you'd read transcripts of their MTV shows, and then you'd get that information from other fans who are posting on these chat forums.
Yeah.
And that was it. And now, yeah, you're right. It's so different. We have e-boys and e-girls, and it's funny to see what these kids thought scene was, because they might just be a little off because we weren't as cool, but it was so cool when we were that age.
Yeah, it was cool because it was revolutionary to us.
Oh yes, yeah.
Our introduction to a counterculture.
Yes.
So I also like to ask everyone, have you ever seen Good Charlotte live?
I have. So I've seen them 7 times. I saw them, they were one of my first major concerts. I think it was NSYNC, Britney Spears, and then a couple years later, it was Good Charlotte for the Noise to the World tour with Simple Plan.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
I still remember how psyched I was. But then after that, I didn't see them until kind of the big comeback. So I saw them at Paradise Rock Club in April of 2016.
Oh, that was like one of the first like reunions.
Yeah. I think they did like a string of like maybe under 10 shows.
Yeah, it was like not even 5, I want to say. It was like very few.
Yeah. It was, this very quick thing. And luckily Boston was on it. So I just remember going by myself and being like, I got to see this, and just having the time of my life.
Oh, amazing.
Yep. And then there was fall of that year when they were touring more. And then I have a couple 2017s on my list, a 2018. And then last year I made room in my Europe trip and flew to Berlin, Germany, and saw them because I kind of wanted to experience what that would be like in a different country.
Berlin is an incredible city.
And it was cool.
And I cannot imagine how great it would have, especially because Berlin has a lot of punk rock history. So that's like a perfect place to go see a Good Charlotte show.
Berlin was kind of wild. And as someone with blue hair, I was amazed how well I fit in.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
Oh my God. I went to Berlin, and then 4 months later, I actually applied for a job in Berlin.
Oh, wow.
I never heard back. Probably they wanted someone who was a citizen, or like an EU citizen at least. But yeah.
But it made it into your heart. I love that.
It did. So you and Emily are co-hosts of your own podcast, Let's Talk Records. I know that you guys have been friends basically your whole life, but how did you meet?
So we met in first grade. We met when we were 6. And it was kind of just like a fast, immediate friendship. I think we were both like, who is that girl? And then like, as soon as we like probably, became actual friends within the first couple months of first grade, we were like inseparable. It was like sleepovers every weekend. And music was always kind of a big part of our friendship. Because her dad was very, very like rock and roll man. So
awesome.
Like the world's biggest Kiss fan. But he was showing us like Blink-182 and like definitely letting us listen to things.
Oh, her dad was showing you Blink-182. That's impressive.
Her parents were a little on the younger side, and my parents were like really chill. So we were always like, we were listening to Britney and Christina and all that like early 2000s stuff too. But like we were listening to Blink-182. Like I kind of remember Enema of the State being out. I mean, everyone remembers all the small things.
Yeah.
But I remember like being allowed to listen to things that like maybe some other kids weren't. And Green Day, when we were in like 6th grade, that whole thing was really open to us, which was pretty cool. So of course, Good Charlotte was right along with that. And I think as soon as I got them from my cousin, it probably wasn't long before she was right there with me.
Yeah. So you live in Boston now. You grew up in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not like super far from what I understand of geography, depending on where in New Hampshire you are. But what kind of role has like Good Charlotte specifically played in that friendship, especially now that you're living in different states?
Yeah. Not far from Boston at all. We both grew up in southern New Hampshire in a little town called Derry, which is about an hour away from Boston. So still kind of like suburbia. But we were in Derry together until I was in about 4th grade. And then my family moved like half an hour away to another town called Goffstown. So we've always been this like long distance friendship, which I do wonder if that has strengthened our relationship since we weren't in the same school. When everything gets really weird around middle school, we were kind of like coming back on the phone together after school being like, I can't believe this girl did this to me or whatever.
it does, like, it speaks a lot to your friendship, I think, because a lot of early childhood and frankly through young adulthood, like a lot of especially early childhood friendships are convenience. Like a lot of my early childhood friends were like, my mom met their mom at synagogue, or it was like we were in the same first grade class. So very, very often at that age, when people move away, you just completely lose touch.
Oh, yeah.
So,
but I mean, we just had something really special, I guess, enough that her dad and my parents could see it. And like years and years later, this must have been like a recent discovery that her dad had like called my parents and been like, I know you guys are moving, but I really don't want the girls to lose what they have.
aww.
I know. So it was like after that, every weekend, like her mom and dad would meet my mom and dad at the like halfway point, and we'd have sleepovers at various houses. And we really just were able to stay friends, by the phone. And then by the time we were teenagers, we could text back and forth. And then it was like social media, and all of that is just kind of translated to how we work with our relationship now. So it's kind of funny. The podcast was like, it was probably something that was always going to happen, but now, we're working on like a passion project together. So it's pretty cool that we've just like built all of these ways to communicate when we can't see each other every day, unfortunately.
Yeah. So how did the podcast start to take shape? Because you're only a few episodes in. But how did it like start to take shape? Like, why was it a podcast of all things?
Yeah. So we've always shot music back and forth at each other. Like, here's a song that I'm really feeling. I picked up on this. Are you picking up on this? And, we've done this for years. But I think we've done it a lot more during this pandemic of a year and kind of going through quarantine. And we both lean heavily on music. So we've been sharing it extra. And I had definitely been sharing a lot of the tracks from Neck Deep's new album that came out this year, kind of throughout the year as they were coming out. I would just send her these like singles and videos. And then when Taylor Swift surprise dropped Folklore at the end of July, it actually came out the same day as the Neck Deep record. So
hence the first episode of your podcast.
Yes. So that's literally how it was born. Is we just both, we were always people that appreciated Taylor Swift, but like we weren't necessarily like what you'd call fans of her. Like, she can write a bop. 1989 was a great record, but like I definitely wasn't like a Swiftie or anything. But Folklore like clicked something with us, which I feel like it did for a lot of other people. Yeah. It turned on a light switch that was a different side of Taylor that I think we both were like, ooh, we like this a lot.
She did something that is like very tough to do, which is she made a quote unquote change, which like longtime fans generally seem to love. And it also seems to have like brought in new people.
Yes, she became a real person in my eyes. Like it was something, that's the only way I can explain it. It suddenly was like, oh, I kind of feel like I could hang out with her now. I mean, she swears in the first like 30 seconds of the first song. I was like, okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
But coupled with all of the Neck Deep tracks, we started to realize that we had a very interesting comparison on our hands, and how this conversation was kind of building. We were like, well, we've, joked about doing a podcast before. Em has done one before. Like, it's quarantine. What else do we do? I'm always doing different things and work in a different medium, and radio / podcasting has been something I've actually never done before. So it was like a very natural next step, but definitely like a whole new thing for us, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have started podcasts during this quarantine, myself included, but like lots of people have for sure.
Yeah.
I have to take a brief Taylor Swift detour and discuss. So I don't know if you spend time on TikTok or Taylor Swift Twitter or Tumblr, if you're in all the fan stuff. After we got Evermore, people have been theorizing that there will be a third album.
I haven't seen this yet.
Oh yeah. Yeah. People are saying it's going to be a trilogy. And what I've kind of seen, which actually makes sense, is that she called Evermore the sister album to Folklore.
Not the twin.
Right. Not the twin, not the companion. She specifically said sister album.
And we know she likes a trick.
Right. But people are saying, oh, there's going to be a brother album. And I don't know. I guess there's a lot of clues. People have said that it might be called Woodvale because that word is like kind of hidden in some photo somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's happening, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. I don't think we would have it by this.
I was kind of sad when Evermore dropped, though.
Why?
Well, yeah, who knows, though? She's releasing things like wildfire, which I think is just, she's feeling prolific right now. That's cool. I was sad when Evermore came out because I was looking for its companion album. I was like, Neck Deep, where's your companion album? No one released a record that I could compare it to. So I would like one more chance to do that. So
well, maybe if you
Woodvale.
Well, maybe you could do like, I don't know, like the Wonder Years had their trilogy, and maybe Taylor Swift is giving us a trilogy. Green Day had a trilogy. Yeah, there definitely bands have done trilogies.
Yeah, I think we'll have to go back and compare like a full trilogy. That's an interesting idea. I'm here for a trilogy. I hope she does it.
Oh yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
In terms of like the format of your show, is that going to be kind of the general format? Like you each kind of show each other a record, basically?
I think so far. I mean, we're feeling pretty like unrestrained from what we're doing. We're kind of doing things on like a when everyone's ready situation versus like a schedule, definitely keeping it more of a passion project that way. So I could see us changing things. We just did a mini episode with 3 holiday songs instead of full records, and we invited our first guest on, and that went really well.
Amazing.
So we're open. We'll see. The records for now, I think it works best with the two of us kind of bringing one thing to each other. And I do have to say for the records, it's been really interesting to dive back into someone's complete like work and watch the videos and consider everything as a whole. Even things that I'm bringing to her that I have loved, I'm learning more about those.
Yeah. It's crazy when you do research, like obviously when I'm doing this show, but like when I was, writing for Substream and running my blog and everything, like for me, quite often it would like really make me just fall in love with an artist, like even more when I would like learn things about them, because it kind of, it makes them like more of a real person, especially when you like watch and read all their interviews and you start to like get to know things about them, and you just, it makes the art feel more real even, I think.
Oh, for sure. And definitely in different eras that people release these projects. I mean, these are chunks of time in these people's lives, and looking at that complete, sector is just so crazy and interesting.
Yeah. Well, one question I was just curious about before we move on to March On is I would just love to hear a little about your art and freelance illustration work. So what type of like freelance are you doing? Like commissions or for clients? Like what is your typical thing?
Yeah, I'm kind of all over the place.
Sure.
I definitely have a drive to design work for the music business. I mean, obviously, much of my life is compelled by the music I'm listening to. But I have such a just like interest and passion in trying to bring a visual aspect to the music that I love so much.
Yeah.
So I'm really open in terms of like, I love to do gig posters and merch work, but I love to do a lot of crazy projects on my own time. So I'd kind of love to get into the scene and start doing some things that people maybe aren't seeing. Mm-hmm. Some interesting pieces of merch or experiences, whether that's like adding to a live show or it's kind of an extra thing. I think we're seeing a lot more like out of the box ideas, and that's right up my alley. That's kind of what I do, a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Amazing. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's dive into March On. So we had, I think it was Twitter we first connected, but we were discussing Good Morning Revival because I think I put out a bat signal that was like, who wants to talk about something from Good Morning Revival?
Yes. And I think that was here's my chance.
Yes. I think that's when we started like messaging. So why did you want to talk about March On in particular?
Yeah, it's always been a song that has stuck with me. Like I remember when the album came out, and quite honestly, and I feel like this is a shared experience. I remember being like, what is this? What?
Yes.
Like, Keep Your Hands Off My Girl was like shocking in terms of different artistic style. Dance Floor Anthem, I remember being like, this is good, but like, I don't know, because I loved Chronicles so much. So I was like, wait, what? How did we get here?
Right.
But then I heard the song and I was like, oh, I love this. Yeah. And although my feelings on the album have changed now, and I really respect a lot of what they do, and I it, March On still has that same feeling to me. Like I can remember that, like, this is home feeling.
Yeah. I relate to that a ton, and I think that's, I mean, you know, very clearly, I think that's something communicated in the song. I think, just that feeling of like, all right, this is like we are who you know and love. Don't worry, we may be like changing, but like our hearts are still there, and we
which is totally okay. Like, you know, artists have to try things and grow and experiment, and I think that's, you know, one of those things we figure out as we grow older as like humans and music fans is like, oh no, like they, you know, there was something inside them. They just had to see like what would happen when they made Keep Your Hands Off My Girl. But you're right. That soul is still there with March On. They're like, this is still like the foundational aspect of who we are, and we're still going to express that.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about what this song means, what it's about. So I want to hear what you think first, and then I'll kind of share what I think it's about, and we can dive into some backstory after that.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I think the song is a maybe an extension of a helping hand, or like a support. Like I kind of look at it like a hand on your back. This one is very just central to the Madden brothers, especially with that acoustic performance. That,
oh my God, yeah.
Ooh, that is just like, there's a vulnerability between them that they're sharing, which is incredible. Not everyone can do that. The way they express the feeling in their vocals is just like, it's very unique to them. And I think they have a very nostalgic and supportive tone, especially if you've been a fan for a while. So I really view this song as like sitting at the table with the Madden brothers. It totally feels like that to me. When I'm having like a tough time and I listen to the song, I just feel like I'm sitting at the table with like two old friends that are like, I'm not going to tell you that you need to do this and this and this to be better and to feel better.
Yeah.
I'm just going to sit with you, and, you know, we're just going to sit in this moment together, and I'm going to help you steady your stance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a really good point about the vulnerability between the brothers, talking about, you know, in this song, talking about not having enough to eat and just being alone and not having anywhere to go. And literally all they had were their dreams, right?
Yep.
And the knowledge that, all right, if we can make it through today, we can make it through tomorrow. And I think the song itself, like, you know, the album version too, not just the acoustic version, it's just very soothing in its delivery, like the vocal delivery, yeah, but just the rhythms are just kind of like a lullaby almost.
Yes, I agree.
I think it's about, you know, it's about struggling, but I think it's also about hope and like finding that hope again, and like the knowledge that, all right, if I can survive this, I can survive tomorrow, you know?
Yep.
I think, you know, obviously this song gets compared to Hold On, and I think they have even at times probably said it's like a sequel to Hold On in a way.
Sure.
I think what I see, and I'm curious how you interpret this, I see Hold On as being directed to someone that is like in immediate crisis, like this person is like going to harm themselves tonight.
Right.
Versus I feel like March On is more written to someone who is having a very hard time, but there's not that like immediate tension, like they're going to do something really drastic right now.
Yes, there's not a choice to be made. It's you're right. It's like the midst of a rough situation, or it's the fallout. I kind of saw it a little bit as like you can't
made
control
it past the immediate crisis.
Right. And like you still have some length to move, and it's not going to be but you can do it, but it's like maybe the aftershocks. Yeah.
We just recorded an episode on the day that I die, and one thing I did when I did that episode, I did some research. We got a couple heavy episodes, not too far from each other.
It's good to feel things, everyone. Like, come on, feel your heart.
I did some research for that, talking about research, like as in reading a couple like psychological papers on the idea of like, do suicide rates go up at certain points in recovery, essentially? And one thing I actually found was that in the period, like immediately after someone leaves residential treatment, like even though they're probably still seeing therapists, quite likely still on medication, but in that transition period, often there is a spike in suicide rates, like there's more of a risk.
Sure.
So I kind of wonder, maybe it's not necessarily that specific situation, right? But
right. Any tough situation, you're processing things like those aftershocks and that fallout after, maybe the peak of a situation, they can still be very powerful and even unexpected if we want to kind of go there and realize that healing isn't linear.
Well, and it's like, someone passes away and there's a funeral and maybe the things are taken care of, but like you still gotta like get through everything,
and once all of that's over, you're still like
processing,
maybe then processing for the first time.
I think I like what you've been saying, aftershocks. Like the person has been pulled back. Like if Hold On is written to someone who is like on the edge, March On is maybe written to someone, or from the perspective of someone who has been pulled back from the ledge, but like is still not really sure how to move forward.
Right. You might have to like climb the mountain to get to final safety, even after you're not at risk of falling off immediately. Yeah. Well,
I want to share a little bit of backstory on this song, which I really was not finding much, which I was kind of surprised.
I know, I tried as well, and I maybe this is just because it was 2007 and not the height of social media.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's like, but like I found interviews from 2000 talking about the first album,
Yeah.
So I think it's that, number one, like just not as much stuff online. It's also like when you search, even with quotation marks, when I would search Good Charlotte interview March On, or what is Good Charlotte March On about? Like it would just pull March and I would get like an interview that was published in March.
Or
something that talked about a show that happened in March. So like definitely when it's a song that's like much more like uncommon kind of words, it's like easier to find exactly what I'm looking for.
Sure.
So there was not a whole lot of backstory on the internet. But there was a Billboard story called The Young and the Hopeful, which is a great story. And it was in the print edition of Billboard, but I will link the Google Books result that you can read it, because it's a great story, and I have referenced that story a few times on this show because it just had like so much info that we don't always get. And per that Billboard story, it was partially inspired by the Cardigans' song Love Fool, which like I saw that name and I was like, what is that? But I listened to the song and I was like, oh, I know this. Do you know the song off the top of your head?
I didn't when I saw the title, but as soon as I clicked play on Spotify, I was like, yes.
And it's like emotionally the songs are completely different, but the kind of like the rhythm of the melody in the first verse, like the cadence and the pacing of the vocals is like where I felt like that influence really came through.
They're also both dreamscapes in my eyes anyway. They're
What do you
very dreamy. The sonic like sounds you're getting.
Yeah.
It just lends itself to a fuzziness.
Yeah. Which is funny because like I feel like so much of Good Morning Revival is like layered and electronics, like this is the dance album, right? And this song is much more stripped back.
Yes. Yeah, simplicity was like the name of the game for this one.
Yeah. I'll read a little quote from Joel from this story. He says, "Our fans definitely know us for writing songs that make them feel better. I think we lost a little bit of that on the last record. There was a little bit of selfishness with the writing on the last record. It was very introspective in a lot of ways. With this record, me and Benj talked about it with each other and said, let's give our fans those other songs again." So they talk about going up to Vancouver and, you know, trying to write songs that would impress Don Gilmore. And that, yeah, March On, the album's closing track, that Madden has been inspired a bit by the Cardigans' Love Fool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that, you know, that quote, he is definitely talking about March On.
Definitely. And I think like it almost makes me sad to hear that the word selfish was used.
Yeah.
Because it's like self-care. And I, you know, can only imagine how draining it is to make artwork for fans. You know, when you're a musician, you're making it for yourself, but you also know that it's your business and you have to cater a little bit to your fan audience when you're this far along in your career. So, you know, I'm glad that they did take some time to be selfish, but I hope that they don't view that as a negative thing, because I think without that, maybe we wouldn't have gotten March On. Well,
and it's also like songs that we tend to appreciate, you know, come from authenticity and from personal experiences often.
Absolutely. Yes.
Like, you know, what we were just saying of like March, you know, Hold On being someone that's on the ledge versus March On being to someone who has come back from that, but is trying to figure out what's next. It's as much, I would say it's possible it's as much to a person who is in that position as like the perspective of someone who has been there and been like, all right, what would I have needed to hear when I was at that point?
Yeah. Yep. I agree.
You know, obviously that's like an extrapolation, but like, I think that's also like, I'm not going to name call. But, you know, there's bands that have done quote unquote anti-suicide songs and such that are like very clearly not written from any personal experience. And they go, yeah, we just know that a lot of you guys are like struggling, so we wanted to write this for you. And it's just very clearly not like you don't feel the connection.
Yeah. And sometimes it's good intention and maybe like bad intention as far as like an easy reach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it is good to write songs that, you know, hopefully inspire people to get help, whether they're in like a crisis situation or it's not like immediate crisis level yet. And I, you know, there will be resources included at the beginning of this episode and in the show notes, but yeah, you can kind of tell, I think, when it's genuine versus not. And I think this song feels very, very genuine to me.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's what I've always really, I think, respected about this song and all of the vulnerable things they do. And that's what I mean about the vocal delivery. And you touched on that too. You just can't hide that if you're really, really genuine and expressing that in that particular way. Yeah. That's hard to fake or hide. And I think it somehow just like comes through that as this is genuine. We really feel this. We mean this. And we may have even written this song not directly to you guys, but we're sharing it with you.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, this song to me feels more like vulnerable than Hold On in that way.
Yes.
Because Hold On, and the story that, you know, they have said in interviews about Hold On was like that was written after talking to fans a lot, like very specifically. But this song seems to just so much pull from their own experiences. And it's, I would definitely say that, like, when I guess we can do this kind of, this little discourse now, but like when I have struggled personally, like I did like a gratitude journal, you know, but like, okay, like I made it through today. Here's things that I survived today. You know, here's 3 good things that I did. And that definitely helped, but it's hard, but telling yourself, you really do sometimes have to repeat to yourself, okay, we can march on. We can march on. I can do this. I can do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's less like dire for people to reach out and give you help when you're maybe past that like first initial peak point, but that makes it maybe even a little bit harder. Because the adrenaline's not rushing so much, and you're now kind of fighting your way out of the paper bag, and you're doing this in your own quiet, like, corner of the universe. And you are just, you know, you're using these mantras like march on, which they repeated a ton in the song. So it has a very mantra-like aspect to me. But I agree with you. You know, I've definitely been there as well, when you're literally like writing yourself lists at the end of every day or the end of every week, or even the beginning of the day to get yourself started. And you're like, look at, we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. Like, that's great. Self, you've done a great job, you know, good job. We can keep doing this. If we just do a little bit more, we're going to get there, or we're going to get somewhere. We're at least just going to get past today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I want to have, and this is not a conversation that I expect to come out of with like concrete answers, but I want to talk about like how we can get the courage to march on, and like what do you think that actually means to march on?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an ever evolving thing. I think it's kind of funny, the connotation of like literally the word march, and they use the word soldier in the song too. It's funny to see the juxtaposition with maybe those like very aggressive go get 'em words mixed with a very like almost broken, sweet, soft, very vulnerable, open. And I the way that you have to attack things. And I guess using the word attack is even maybe not what I'm going for, but you have to, you know, it might be marching on for you is literally just lying on the floor and processing and feeling, because all of those things will move you forward, even though what you're doing on paper may not look like the most productive thing. It's finding whatever works for you and really listening to yourself.
It's like when you're at that crisis kind of point, and not even necessarily like immediate crisis, but when you're having a hard time, literally sometimes productive just has to be surviving, you know? And like, okay, so what does that look like? Maybe that's like, well, I don't have the energy to shower today, but I need to eat something. I need to get out of bed. I don't have to get dressed up, but I need to put clothes on, you know, like doing what you need to survive. And like, that's productive, you know?
Huge. Yeah. Even if it's just looking outside the window and just like letting the sun enrich your eyes through a piece of glass. Yeah. That's great.
That's been like I think the most important thing for me, just like through all of this. Like, I love working from home, but if I don't, like in my new apartment, my mail is inside. In my old apartment, I had to go outside to get the mail. Okay. So like there was like my like first full week here, I like barely left. I like don't think I left the house at all for 4 days. Like, I did not go outside for 4 days.
I feel you. I've been doing the same thing because I also work from home. Yeah. I live in the city, mail's inside. Yep. And I will go through a whole week and be like, oh no, Jen, you didn't even go outside. Oh, time for a walk.
Right. That's why I was like, all right, once a week, I'm going to wake up early to like walk to a coffee shop to get like a latte. And like yesterday I was like, you know what? Let me like walk to the co-op to get my groceries, because that will be good for my body. Instead of trying to get in the car.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who has brought up the topic of self-care versus self-comfort. And I think that's such an interesting thing and might be kind of part of that, like, push yourself to march on thing. So there's things you do out of self-care and there's things you do out of self-comfort. And self-comfort might be ordering greasy food and really just not letting yourself leave your bed. And these things you have to do sometimes. But then there's self-care, and that's taking your daily meds and
pushing
yourself outside. Yeah, brushing your teeth, doing those things that are a little bit of a struggle when you're having a really hard time, but it is really in your best interest, and it's not going on anyone's productive, Forbes best of the year lists. It's just things you have to do to really take care of yourself in those ways. And, it's all part of the conversation. Maybe March On is taking a little bit more courage to push yourself to just do those self-care things when all you want to do is self-comfort.
Well, and sometimes it's like, okay, the self-care that I need to do is I need to eat food.
Right.
And I do not have food in the house. And I'm dealing with anxiety. I can't stomach the store. Maybe in that instance, ordering takeout is the self-care,
Yeah. Self-comfort plays into self-care too. I mean,
totally.
I think you have to have a certain amount of self-comfort that counts as self-care too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think of the idea that, like, your past makes you stronger? Because I think that, that relates to this song in what they say of, if we can make it through tonight, we'll see the sun. Like, does your past make you stronger? Like, and when I say past, I guess I'm specifically referencing, and not like you specifically, kind of like on a general level, but like, do your past experiences make you stronger? Do they make you better equipped? Or do they make it, like, harder to do things in the future?
I think it depends. I think a lot of people are dealt a lot of cards that, no one necessarily deserves, or it doesn't make sense. I think simply overcoming those things in the way of just like, this horrible thing happened in my past, but here I am 5 years later, still existing as a human in any capacity. That's enough to make you stronger. Mm-hmm. But I do think there are some, like, lessons or some things that will make you stronger coming from your past. Absolutely. Life is one big learning thing. Or maybe you were treated so badly in your past, but you don't do that to someone in the future. Yeah. There's things that those cards are dealt to you that, like, they don't make sense and no one deserves that, but you might find yourself in a situation later on that you can really turn around and not perpetuate. So sure.
I think to add just nuance to that phrase, I think, like, oftentimes it's like, you get through something. Like, there was a boy a couple of years ago that it was not good,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
I was like, all right, I've been through this. Nothing else will hurt this bad. I literally said that to myself. But, to add important nuance, trauma and lasting effects of trauma, whether that's like diagnosed PTSD or something else, like, that is also very real. And, like, your difficult experiences they might make you, like, stronger. They might not, and that's okay. And you're not weak for having lasting trauma. I feel like it's important to add that to the conversation.
Yes. Sometimes there is no lesson. And that's what I mean by there's a lot of unfair things that just happen. Sometimes there is no lesson and you get nothing out of it. And it just is something that happens to you. And that is just, like, terrible. And I'm proud of anyone that can move past that. And you know what? Sometimes you just can't, it happens, but it is a weird mix. I think you can try to go through life with a generally positive, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger. But, like, sometimes you just have to self-comfort yourself and be like, we didn't deserve that.
Yeah. I think that's important. And I feel like, not to go, like, too hard down a rabbit hole, but I think often I feel like people try to be understanding to the point where it's like, oh, you're so understanding of other circumstances that you like justify the pain they've caused you, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes when you justify your pain or someone else's, that can do a lot more damage.
Yeah. Right. Because then you're like, oh, I can't speak up.
Right. The pain just exists sometimes, and it's just there, and you got to acknowledge it, but sometimes there is no like, you can't just explain it away. Just is a part of people sometimes. That's okay.
Do you have any like specific memories or stories you want to share about this song?
Sure. Yeah. I think this will show you like how much I've grown up with them.
Yeah.
I remember probably around the time that this album came out, this song like playing in my mom's van at like 4:30 a.m. We were on our way to the airport. I was about to go on like my first like school trip. I was super nervous, but like this song came on and I was like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So I will always remember that for some strange reason. And then I think, there are definitely some like situations of loss and health issues with family and friends at this time. And it's, I'm not questioning why the universe brought us together to have this conversation at this time, because I think things just cosmically line up sometimes. But I have definitely been sitting at the table with Benji and Joel for the last couple of weeks, and it has done a lot for me, just as it did at age 13, 14, now at 27, I really just have so much respect and comfort in this song, and it just transcends. And I hope that they know that, art really goes a lot farther than you realize sometimes when you put it out. And I hope that they realize that something that they put out 13 years ago is still being used by people of all ages and all situations and whatever, but their presence at this metaphorical table that they've set up has really held me pretty steady. So it's cool. Music is great that way. I think it's important. And when you can really lean into it, it will be there for you.
Definitely.
I want to know how you feel about this song. Do you have any good stories?
I do. And this is like, I'm like a little nervous, I'll be honest, because this is like a specific that I have not, I don't think, shared on this podcast. Despite as
safe space.
Right. Despite as like consistently vulnerable as I am, it hasn't necessarily come up. I remember listening to this album a lot when I was in New Orleans with my dad. I definitely did not have a leak of this album like 3 weeks before it came out, which is definitely not why I was listening to this album on my spring break in New Orleans. Definitely not. And my big thing with this song is that I've talked a lot on this show about struggling with depression and suicide and things like that. And I have been struggling with self-injury, as unfortunately many people do. And I just remember like kind of knowing I needed to like stop and not do that and like find some healthy coping mechanisms. And I just remember this song like really comforting me through that. Like, okay, if you can make it through today, you can make it through tomorrow. You can keep doing this. And it's like, sometimes it literally is, let's make it through the next hour, Okay, let's make it through the next hour. And then maybe it's, let's make it through the next day. Let's make it through the next week, the next month, the next year. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really pretty incredible. And it's just another testament of how strong of a landing pad that they set up with this song.
They really do.
Yeah.
And I think like for me at least, and I'm sure you relate, but just like if it's something that I know has helped me a lot in the past, then it's like in the future, like going forward, I'm like, all right, this has helped me before. I will put it on. It will make me feel better.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So you have that comfort.
Yes. And it's just another layer on this song, especially.
Yeah.
I know I'm always going to feel strangely grounded and not like just losing my stuff when Joel sings Don't Cry. Like,
Yeah.
It just puts you right there. And I really appreciate that. And I think you do too. And I think so many other people do.
Yeah. I love, we have to talk a little bit about the acoustic.
Yes, we do.
I think this is my favorite Good Charlotte acoustic.
I think I agree with you.
Like it translates so well. And like it really works with the song. And I know they write a lot on acoustic, but this song just translates so well to acoustic.
Yeah, it's even more simplified,
yes.
Which is quite beautiful.
Yeah. Which in this song I think really works.
Yeah. It's got good bones. Like, there's some great production, but overall, the bones of the song are the most important part.
Yeah, and it's like the emotions of this song are not high energy emotions.
No.
Like there's, I don't know what it's like called, but there's like an axis of emotion that goes from like positive to negative emotion, which would be like, happy versus sad, and then high versus low arousal. So that would be like excited would be like positive emotion, high arousal.
Okay.
Anger would be high arousal, negative emotion.
Right.
Sadness might be low arousal, negative emotion. Mm-hmm. But I feel like this song is like kind of giving you that positive emotion, kind of lower arousal, that like contentment, I think.
Yeah.
Which I think is why it works so well acoustically. And I'm sure someone who's more well-versed in music theory could speak on the structures and the chords of the song, whatever. And like,
sure.
Honestly, I kind of feel like I should learn maybe more music theory and just learn about production, because I think that would help me in the way I talk about music. Because I obviously tend to focus so much on the emotional aspect, but
it's a whole other world, the sound production. But I think it's okay. Sometimes it can be a little bit separate than the emotion you're hearing. So I think it's pretty cool to come at it from a place where you're not thinking about it in a production level. I'd love to see the future you do that too, because that's just going to add to your skill set. Yeah. But
I would love to learn more about that. That's why it was really cool to have Jesse Cannon on the show.
Yes.
He's a producer, so he could give like his whole thoughts on that. I had my dad on to talk about his thoughts as a drummer, which was also very cool.
Both episodes were so cool in the way that those people, one I had to listen to Dad because, I had a Good Charlotte mom, so I get it.
Yeah.
And Jesse Cannon, I used to listen to his podcast with Zach Cirillo. I think it was called Off the Record back in the day. Loved that one. So I was super excited to see him on, because it is like, as someone who sits in front of a production studio, he does look at things for like such a different lens than you and I are looking at it.
Right. We're largely like, oh, well, like I was sad and this song made me feel less alone when I was sad. And Jesse Cannon is like, here's why it's like, he says, like, he's like, yes. And also, this is why it's so cool and so impressive from a production aspect.
Right. It's logical versus emotional sides of the brain, which are so cool to just look at the differences.
And they're both artistic. It's just like different versions of art, I think, or different aspects of it.
Absolutely.
So I want to read some critics' reviews on this.
All right.
And like, obviously, I get defensive. I'm like a little more touchy with a song like this, just because I think this one is, as I just shared, this one's like really special to me.
Yeah.
So, Pop Matters. And Pop Matters has reviewed a few of their records, and I don't know what this Adrian person is on, and like I don't know why they continue to review their records, because they clearly don't like them. And
this was like, a rough one.
Right. Too often, though, we get dragged down in the depressing morass of Good Charlotte's faux profundity, and March On's attempt at a populist anthem falls flat. So,
not all art gets to all people.
Yeah.
I feel sad at the words faux profundity because I actually do think the song is profound.
That's what gets to me.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder, it's like, I think you and I probably know, like, A, have spent more time with their records than this person has, and
Sure.
B, probably know more about, like, the twins' backstory and the band's backstory and everything.
Right.
So we have a different lens.
Yep.
I don't know. Oh, well. CD Starts, which is a German website, gave the album a 7.5 out of 10. The readers gave it a 6.4 out of 10.
Okay.
So this is German and Chrome translated to English. So I do know we have some German listeners that listen to this. So if you go and you read this and you're like, oh, that's wrong, I'm sorry. I try. The opinions of the critics differ on the lyrics, but the carefree rocking music, which either spreads a good mood or expresses a certain grief, trumps the songs on the competition. For this album, diversity was again the focus. In addition to the first single, Keep Your Hands Off My Girl, which sounds rather untypical for GC, true. Ballads, March On, and the usual heavier songs, Misery, were of course mixed up. The good end of the long player, which I guess, because LP is long playing record. The good end of the long player is the very happy Broken Hearts Parade, where even trumpets decorate the chart-compatible sound, and the ballad March On, which finally proves that fairly simple ballads can still be good to listen to.
Yeah. How did you feel about them calling the song a ballad? Because I actually was kind of surprised when I saw that word used.
Yeah, maybe it's something that got slightly lost in translation. Who knows?
Sure.
I don't really feel like this is a ballad, though. Like, I feel like if there's a ballad on this album, it's Where Would We Be Now?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, I don't feel like this is a ballad. So
No.
I don't know. Maybe that got lost in translation. It's Google Chrome translating this in my browser. So Focus on the Family is plugged in. It's like a Christian conservative website. Like, I say conservative not in the political sense per se, so much as like morally conservative. Fans of like family friendly content in the strictest way.
Right.
So they have a little review of this album, and in the section under pro-social content, which I guess is like, this is what we like. This is what is good, what good Christian children can listen to. They said empathy and compassion rule as the band encourages a hurting soul to march on.
Aw.
Very sweet.
Yeah.
The Orange County Register gave this album a grade D. And they said, it's also the foulest heaps of phoniness in many moons. Okay, obviously I disagree with the phoniness, but again, if you don't like have the kind of connection that like someone like you or I would have, you might call it phony, right? Okay.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Coming into this, I can't imagine.
Yeah. And then there's March On, which steals the sentiment of Float On, then expresses it in the lamest of lyrics. And like, normally I don't put a whole lot of like notes next to these quotes, but like, Float On, listeners, Float On is a song by Modest Mouse. Great song. But I put in my notes, I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize Modest Mouse invented the concept of getting up and going and getting motivation to keep on keeping on when you've been down. Also, we're going to look up when that song came out.
It's got to be around the same time. It made me think so much of like the elitism that Good Charlotte has faced throughout their career. People just being like, there is quote unquote better bands out there.
Yeah.
This just felt like another one of those things.
Yeah. So just for reference, Modest Mouse Float On came out in 2004. And I just want to mention that in 2000, Good Charlotte had Motivation Proclamation. Yes, and in 2002, Good Charlotte had both Hold On and Moving On.
Mm-hmm.
So really, maybe Modest Mouse stole Float On from Good Charlotte's Motivation Proclamation, Hold On and Moving On.
Quite possibly.
I doubt Modest Mouse like stole that from Good Charlotte.
Hey, you never know.
Right. I think that's just a pretty universal theme that like many people can relate to, regardless of like what band they're in. But you never know.
But if you're the OC register, then Modest Mouse is your god, and that's it.
Right. There was a bio on artistdirect.com that I'm not sure if Artist Direct like wrote this bio or like what the source was, but I just like what they said. From the opening sounds of Good Charlotte's fourth album, Good Morning Revival, it is evident that the world famous band, who have sold over 9 million albums, has revolutionized its sound for 2007. And by the time the optimistic parting shot March On rolls around, it's evident that this is the vibrant, adventurous, and unexpected rock album that has redefined the group.
Vibrant.
Yeah. We're going to read some YouTube comments. First on the song itself and then from the acoustic.
Okay.
Aaron Black says, I can definitely hear the Love Fool influence. Great song. Denzil Boart, I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but Denxylboart said, when I first heard this song as a teenager, not only did I love it, but I thought it was a sequel to their Young and Hopeless album, Hold On. It's always given me comfort. Yeah. There were a lot more comments on the acoustic of this.
That's interesting, actually. Yeah. Okay.
Well, it's, I don't know, and this is like a whole thing I'm curious to find out, but there are 2 Good Charlotte YouTube channels.
Oh.
And like, not all of their songs were like officially uploaded in like, you know, whenever the channels were made.
Right.
So one is the like official one that YouTube takes you to is Good Charlotte. 486,000 subscribers. Okay.
All right.
But there's also one that, because they had some like Youth Authority content, and it might have been like a record label thing, I don't know. But there's also a Good Charlotte channel that's 2 words with 7.3 thousand subscribers, and that is like all Youth Authority stuff.
Okay.
So I think it might have been like a record label thing because they were independent for Youth Authority.
Right.
Yeah, so that was a rabbit hole. But I was like, you know, that was going to come up at some point.
Yeah.
So, Aiden the Weeb on the acoustic said, this song helps me get through a lot. I get harassed a lot in school. I'd be dead by now if not for Good Charlotte, GC fan for life.
Well, Aiden, everyone's with you.
Yeah.
We all feel that.
Yeah.
Especially as a kid, it's like, that's such a throwback to hear. Because I like remember being like probably around that age and like feeling similar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Becky Baker said, this is even better than the recorded version. Chris Mayer Honor said, when this big muscular man with tattoos starts singing in the gentlest and softest voice, don't cry. It's just amazing. Brings a tear to my eye. We will march on indeed.
That one got me when I read that one too. Yeah. Because it's true. You can't judge a book by its cover. You know, they're making some pretty vulnerable stuff. And if you weren't familiar with them, you might be a little surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to read some song meanings comments. Romance Girl 802 said, OMG, if this song isn't the song that can give me strength to believe and keep it on going on, then I don't know what is. Beautiful song.
Aww.
Japster said, reminds me of Move Along by the All American Rejects, except for slower.
That's an interesting comparison.
Yeah. I mean, I can also see it, though. Like, the songs sound very different, but, like, Move On, Move Along, like...
Yep.
Yeah. Buried Alive by Love said, not even a patch on Hold On. Yeah, it's okay. Not as deep as their other lyrics, though. I'm disappointed, but still I can't help but listen to it.
Maybe it struck them different at a different point in their life later on. Or it didn't.
Silent Eyes said, I fucking love this song. GC said this was like a message to their fans to not give up and keep marching on, and one day you'll get to where you want to be, like them.
Aw, yes.
Sarah09 Lemon said, the song meaning is to let go of the pain that you dealt with in the past and march on, which means to move on. I think the song relates to everyone's life because no matter what situation you are in, at some point you have to move on.
Yep.
Yeah. A couple Amazon reviews shouted it out. Just one I'll read. Two I'll read, actually. Sean Thomas gave March On a 3 out of 5 and said that it ends the album on a decent note. That if you're a fan of Good Charlotte, you know, it's worth it for the good songs on the CD. Another user said that March On rips the lead guitar riff from the Killer's recent hit All These Things That I've Done, and most blatant of all is how they rip off Coldplay.
I'm a fan of both of those bands, and I can't even see that. It's interesting that they did.
Yeah. I mean, they're not wrong for seeing that.
No, not at all. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up.
Sure.
Jenn, how has March On held up for you over time?
Yeah, I think, as I was saying, it just continues to grow and evolve. It's looking at this episode in particular, I was kind of like, oh, wait, how old were they when they wrote this song? Because I've started to do this with my own podcast and look at music from that.
Oh, it's such a trip, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah. So I'm 27 and they were 28 when this album came out. So
they would have been 27 when writing it.
Right. Isn't that pretty... I love when things line up like that. So it's kind of funny to think about this song being from the perspective of a 27-year-old, because all my life they've been, so much older than I am.
Yeah.
Not so much, but like role models.
Yeah.
In a positive way. So I think it's cool to look at that and be like, oh wow, like, that would have been my peer writing this song.
Yeah.
So it just, continues to grow. It's pretty open like that. I think it's timeless.
Definitely. Yeah. It's held up super well for me. And I think I've really over time continued to appreciate the vulnerability that they really have with each other on this song.
Definitely. Yes.
So a few more questions, Jenn. What has Good Charlotte meant to you over the years and how has that changed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I think, they were such a big part of me getting into music and kind of realizing that was such a big part of my identity and passions. And then they went away and I grew up a little bit more and, then suddenly they're back. And I just feel like maybe that I've been riding the second wave of Good Charlotte even harder than the first one.
Yeah.
Which has been really fun. It's cool to get back into that as an adult and still have the same amount of fun or maybe even more fun than I did when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's on a practical level, I will say it sounds like you had to. I have definitely seen them more times post hiatus than pre hiatus. Mm-hmm. And on just a very practical level, it's well, I'm an adult now and I don't have to skip out on a show because my dad doesn't feel like driving me on a school night.
Exactly. Yeah, I was so young when that first wave was around that, getting that one show was pretty incredible. But now I feel like I can be so much more a part of it. I mean, I can fly to Germany and see them.
Oh my God. Goals. So, Jenn, do you have any last words about March On, about Good Charlotte, about Let's Talk Records, or about yourself?
Yeah, come over to Let's Talk Records and continue to feel things. That's, I'm always going to be a place for people to process emotions with. I'm happy to help do that through music and kind of share how I'm feeling as well. So I'm just so happy to have had this conversation with you and gotten a little deep and real.
Yeah. Well, before we head out, so we have the Generation GC and Friends Spotify playlist. Mm-hmm. And I always like to include obviously the song covered on the show, as well as a recommendation from our guests. So what's a recommendation you would like to leave our listeners with? And that can be anything that's not Good Charlotte that you're digging lately. Yeah, I think I really have to leave you guys with Little Dove by Neck Deep.
It's off the album. All Distortions Are Intentional. That's the one that came out this year. It was a very big, pivotal part of starting the podcast. We actually kind of started this comparison because we realized that Little Dove was so close to Invisible String on Folklore. So I also think Little Dove is a little like March On.
Okay.
It's a great pairing. So if people want to keep feeling and they need just, they need a couple extra hands on their back, reach out to my friends in Neck Deep.
I've you're the second person that's mentioned Neck Deep on as their recommendation, and I'll be honest, and this is what I said before, I've not ever really been a Neck Deep fan, but now that especially having heard your podcast and having you and Mark recommending them, I'm like, all right, I need to now knowing what I know, maybe I'll be able to go into this album with more appreciation for it.
They did something different with this album. Definitely a little bit more introspective and very, very vulnerable. So I recommend listening to some of their and how they talk about it. I think you'll enjoy it. And that's how Emily felt too. It was very, very foreign to her. She's like, oh, this is just too pop punk for me.
Yeah.
And this one is just so different. So,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I got some listening to do. Jen, This has been amazing. Where can people keep up with you and your podcast?
Yeah. So, Instagram is going to be the best place. So you can hit me over at 7 Projects on Instagram. And the podcast, we're also on Instagram. We're over at Let's Talk Records.
Amazing. Jen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Listeners, thank you for tuning in, and please make sure to check out Let's Talk Records. My name is Molly Huddleston. I've been your host. Last week, we talked about The Truth from the Chronicles of Life and Death, and next week, we'll be back talking about a song from Cardiology. Please make sure to follow Generation GC at Generation GC Pod, POT, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And you can follow me, Molly, at M Huddleston, MHUDELSON, on Twitter and Instagram. Please make sure to subscribe to the show, follow, rate, leave reviews, and most importantly, tell all your friends. Thanks, everyone, for listening.